Welcome back to Here for the Common Game. Today, in deck number 841, we're going to talk about Slogurk. No, that is not something you will find in the dairy case at your local grocer. It is the Overslime. So for 3 mana, excuse me, we have a 3/3 ooze with trample. Okay. Whenever a land is put into your graveyard from anywhere, put a 1/1 counter on Slogurk. It's like a reverse landfall. Remove 3 counters to bounce it to its owner's hand. You know, so you can, if it's going to die, you bounce the you remove the counters, bounce it back to your hand, so you can pay retail and not have to pay the commander tax. Okay. But when Slogurk leaves the battlefield, return up to 3 lands from your graveyard to your hand. This is interesting. It's not another green-blue landfall deck, but it kind of is. So, we want to get cards into the graveyard. Let's look at how we do that. Sure, we'll start with that first. When I first saw this card, by the way, Jason Alt over at Brainstorm Brewery has a wonderful version of this deck that I got slaughtered by. So, it's not this exact build, but it is a beast of a deck. Anyway, the very first card that I thought of was Zurinorb. I mean, of course, this particular Zurinorb has seen some better days. It's had lots of land sacrificed to it. So you sack a land for 0 cost to gain 2 life. That puts your lands into the graveyard for your commander. You also have good stuff like crop rotation. Being able to sack a land to go search a land. Maybe a specific one that you need. Trade routes. You can bounce the lands you have. See, that's the thing with landfall. Once you play the land, it's there, you know. But this lets you bounce the land so you can, if you want to, repeat those landfall triggers, or discard the land to draw a card, thus helping your commander. We have things like Elvish Reclaimer. You know, it's a 3/4 as long as you got 3 lands in the yard. And then it allows you to sack lands. Have the Fallow Worm. Yes, this is a blast from the past, right? Some Weatherlight. 3 mana 4/4, which nowadays that would have been it, but it had a drawback. You choose and discard a land, which is not a drawback for this particular deck. Harvest Worm gets the land back. So I figured, you know, if I'm in for one, I'm in for both, right? Restore. Just put a land from the graveyard onto the battlefield. Because, I mean, just naturally, lands going to the yard, like Terramorphic and Evolving and things like that, you can... Yeah, it's good stuff. Ramanop Excavator lets you play lands from your graveyard. Now, if you've got the Crucible of Worlds, put it in here by all means. This is what I have. Titania. A land is put into a graveyard, you get a 5/3 for your trouble. Now that Zurinorb's looking mighty good now. The Mending of Dominaria gets all your lands back. Splendid Reclamation got a reprint in Crimson Vow. Brings all your lands back. And last card before we get into our ramp is Joko Mortar. Pause for the laughter to die down. Yeah, Joko Mortar doesn't see a ton of play. 7 mana, 12/12 trample. Comes into play tapped. When it comes into play, you gotta sacrifice 5 lands. And it doesn't untap. You play an island, it untaps. This is, in most decks, this is terrible. But it was made for this deck. Now, granted, it was Cold Snap. Cold Snap was what, 2006? This card's been waiting 15 years for me to put it in a deck. Literally 15 years it's been chilling in the binder. So, let's look at our ramp. No Soul Ring in here. We want to focus on lands, right? I mean, I have some rocks, but the Colding Oracle, it's either going to get you a land or a card. Of course, the Rampant Growth is going to get you a land. Here, let's knock out these rocks. The Simic Signet, Locket, Cluestone, and Key Rune. Everything else is like, Scare Tiller. When it becomes tapped, you can either put a land from your hand onto the battlefield or a land from your yard to the battlefield, which both of those work great in this particular deck. We have Harrow. Harrow is perfect because you're sacrificing a land to get that commander trigger, and it bumps you up by getting 2. Now, Dreamscape Artist turns every card in your hand into a Harrow. Not many decks actually get to have these side by side, so you can discard a card, which can be a land, to sack a land, 2 triggers for commander, to go get 2 lands. Beautiful. Renewal is an old Homelands version of you sack a land to get a basic land. True, you draw a card at the beginning of the next turn. It gets overlooked quite a bit because, quite frankly, 1 for 1, and it's got to be basic. But then there's Rolling Regrowth, which is Harrow, but puts them in the battlefield tapped. So, a little bit of card draw, Explore, Urban Evolution. I classify those as card draw just because you're always going to draw the cards. You may not always make the land drops. In this deck, you probably will. We're running heavy on lands. I want to say it's in the 40s. Double Meat, Double Cheese. Everybody loves the Rites of Flourishing. These are getting harder and harder for me to find now. Hard to find in this room. Factor Fiction, it does put cards in your hand, and if you want, it can put lands in your graveyard. So, of course, the Growth Spiral, Compulsive Research, unless they discard a land. So, we do have a little bit of +1 counter stuff going on here. Ride the Avalanche, Avalanche Stone down. Ride the Avalanche, gives you next spell, Flash, so you can drop a creature on somebody else's turn as a surprise blocker, and then it gets counters on it, so that's neat. Invigorating Surge, we saw this in the last deck. Put a counter on it, then double it. Plax Caster Frogling, I'm telling you, you don't get to see this index that much. Target creature with a 1/1 counter on it gains Shroud. That also protects your commander. Also kind of protects your Hero's Bane too, because it's a pretty good +1/+1 counter card. Especially in Simic, because we're doing the things. Simic Ascendancy, since we're doing the +1 counters, we might as well have an alternate win condition as well. We're going to have Vorel of the Hullclade. Now, this is neat. Double the number of each kind of counter on target artifact, creature, or land. So, +1/+1 counters, right? Well, we also have a Magistrate Scepter. This card I love. Does not see enough play. Magistrate Scepter, with enough proliferation, and stuff like Vorel does, you can just take all the turns. It's the lightning round. You know what happens in the lightning round. It's me, you, me, and then back to me, and then me again, and then me one more time, then you, then me. Yeah. Got our Swiftfoot boots to protect, obviously, whatever we need protecting, probably the commander. So let's look at our... here's something else I don't get to do a whole lot. Flux Channeler. Cast a non-creature spell, proliferate, along with the Evolution Sage, landfall proliferate. So, look, those two, we're going to be doing both, right? So, I figured both of them were... We got the Ruin Crab, with the lands coming and going, Ramanop Excavator letting us play lands from the yard, Azusa letting us play more lands than we're supposed to play. Just, Scoot Swarm. Oh my gosh. Yes, Scoot Swarm is insane, especially in a dedicated landfall deck. This is not, but kind of, we're wanting to get the cards into the yard. Skyshot Ranger, just, you know, if this is your turn 1 drop, hey. Retreat to Kazandu, Kathmandu, you know, put a counter on something. Crash of Rhino Beetles gets ridiculous if you have 10 or more lands. Tatiova, Benthic Druid, I mean, it's Simic, it rotates around land. It's hard for us not to put a Tatiova in here. I realize it's kind of one of those things now where she's probably a little too good. Multani, check this out. He counts your lands in play and the lands in your graveyard for how big he is. That's what makes that deck so good. Ancient Green Warden, you can play lands from your graveyard. Here again, it's redundance. And if a land entering the battlefield causes a trigger ability, it triggers your landfalls an additional time. But let's talk about the All-Star. Terravor, right? Here, this was Odyssey. This card's been waiting 20 years on me to put it in a deck. 3 mana for a Trampling Lurgoyf. Power and toughness each equals the number of land cards in all graveyards. Now, there was thing back in the day, I used to do this, have a red-green, like 60-card deck, and it was Wildfire, and, you know, but Terravor, perfect for this specific deck. Cultivator Colossus, equal number of lands you control, and when it enters the battlefield, you can land dump if you want. And of course, Kamal's Druidic Vow. Getting some lands for the free. It looks like a ton of fun. It really does. That leads us to our removal. Of course, we have our 2 counter spells. By the way, thank you very much, Mr. Chris. He saw that I needed some counter magic, and he said, I got you. So the Arcane Denial and the counter spell was donated by Chris as well. Have our Naturalize. What'd you say? Yes, I've got the Return to Nature as well. Rapid Hybridization. Good one-shot. And I have Trigon Predator in the removal slot because it doesn't... That's what it does. I mean, it flies. It's going to eat up artifacts and enchantments. If we happen to mount up some counters on it, so be it. But it's a pretty good card. Repeatable, reusable removal is amazing. And now that brings us to our non-basic lands, of which there's a bunch. Now, Jungle Basin. This is... I did get this specific card from Jason because it's just amazing. Because it says, or bury this. So, this is a free land drop to the yard, if you need it, as well as Coral Atoll and Simic Growth Chamber works a little different. You have to bounce a land. It just might be this one. But cycling lands. Your cycling lands, the whole idea is you may or may not want them. Here you don't. You're just going to cycle them jokers away. You're going to cycle them, get to draw a card, and trigger your commander. So that's the Desert of the Indomitable, the Tranquil Thicket, Desert of the Mindful, Lonely Sandbar, the aforementioned Terramorphic Expanse, and Evolving Wilds. They're great for color fixing, and, it puts a land in the graveyard. So does Bant Panorama. Field of Ruin to get rid of those troublesome lands. Blighted Woodland and Blighted Cataract both do their thing by sacrificing. Then we have our, the good old standard Rogue's Passage, but our actual color fixing lands. The Command Tower, Quandrix Campus, Lumbering Falls, Thornwood Falls, a lot of falls, Simic Guildgate, Botanical Sanctum, Tanglepool Bridge, and Woodland Stream, and a whole bunch of basics over here. So there's Slogurk. Haven't had a chance to play this one yet, but I am eagerly looking forward to it. It looks like a ton of fun. Of course, I get to play with, things like Azusa and Ramanap, so you know I'm liking it. Let's go start another row with Slogurk, number 841. Going onto the wall. And that is it for today. Yes, I know the past 5 or 6 days I have been in the same clothes. That's because I've recorded them all in the same day. In my jammies. In the vault here. Well, that's all I have got for today. I do appreciate y'all watching, liking, subscribing. Thank you so much. I couldn't do it without y'all. But right now, we're going to go ahead and shuffle and cut.